Why are we learning about Joseph? Someone asked me, why are we learning about Joseph? This dude was a guy, actually in Hebrew, his name is called Joseph. Y'all say Joseph? I like that name a little bit better. Joseph, you know. I know a guy named Joseph, actually. He's a rabbi. Rabbi Joseph Greenberg. But anyway, Joseph is his name. And he was 17 years old when we first learned about him. And y'all say, wow, that's young, right? Who's here is 17 years old? We have some 17-year-olds in the house. Only Aaron. I'm just kidding. Kyle is the only 17-year-old? Wow. All right. Well, so Kyle, stand up real fast. This is what Joseph looked like. Exactly what he looked. No, I'm just kidding. But so Joseph was 17 years old. And actually, he's written about in not only in biblical history, but as well in Egyptology, or the ancient history of Egypt, and they kind of write about him. He's called by a different name because, as we read in the story, he actually becomes second in command right under Pharaoh, and Pharaoh gives him his signet ring in a robe, representing that he gives him all of his authority. Is that cool or what? So here's this dude who's 17 years old, and by the time he's 30, he's in second in command, basically like, you know, ruling the world, you know what I'm saying? Excuse me. So that's why we're learning about Joseph, because I believe that he was a young person that models for us someone that is after the will of God, and most importantly, being consistent in the will of God. He was 17 years old, and he was thrown in prison. This dude was accused of raping a person, actually. He also was thrown in a pit. There's a couple other things that happened, but he was steadfast, which also means consistent or faithful in what he was doing with his life. And so that's why I believe we need to learn about Joseph. Is that cool? That's kind of the why we're learning behind Joseph, is because he is a man who was consistent in the will of God. Cool? Y'all say cool. All right? All right, let's get into this. We're going to read, we read this passage of Scripture all week last week, but I don't think any of us remembered that we read it last week, so we're going to read it all over again. Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 11. We're going to read through the whole thing, but it's up on screen. And so I'm going to come over here and we're going to read it. Are y'all ready? All right. This is out of the New Living Translation, and I'm going to start right here. Here we go. Y'all give me a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Boom. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. And this is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, y'all say 17. 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Someone say snitch. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go there, but I got called that in school once, and someone stabbed me right here in my stomach, and it hurt bad. I almost punched. All right, let's go on. Okay, snitches get stitches, just playing. All right, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for him, for Joseph, a beautiful robe, right? We learned about this a little bit last week, and that's why on the promise slide we have that colorful coat, because it represents the colorful robe. But his brothers hated him. Oh, did I miss out on a verse there? But there it is. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. Y'all say, y'all have like a younger sibling, right? And just the most love. We talked about that last week. They love the younger sibling so much more than everyone else. I'm just like, bruh, Andrew, what the heck? No, I'm just kidding. Next slide, please. It said this. He says this to him. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain, and suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed before mine. Which would have been a weird dream. I'd be like, Joseph, dude, you're eating too much pizza than that before. What's up with this? And he said, and his brothers responded. They're like, so you think you're going to be king over us? I don't know how they jumped from bundles of hay to a kingship. But obviously this is something more than just a dream. It was a vision. It was a representation. It was something that was prophetic of what was going to happen in the future, and his brothers caught on to that. So it was more than just hay. The hay represented his brothers, and the one in the middle represented Joseph. Okay? Is that cool? If y'all are with me, say I'm with you. All right. We usually don't read this much Bible, but I love the Bible, and we need it sometimes more than my preaching. Okay? So his brothers responded, so you think you're going to be king over us? Do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his brother's dreams and the way he talked about them. Interesting, huh? All right, let's go to the next slide. And it says this. Soon, Joseph had another dream. And again, he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream. And he said, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, what did they do? They bowed low before me. Next slide. This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. He was like, yo, what kind of dream is that? You're dissing me. He asked Joseph this. He said, next slide, please. He said, will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to you before the ground? So obviously this is another symbolic dream, and it was more than just the moon and the sun, right? It was something that represented, the sun represented his father, and the moon represented his mother, and the 11 other stars represented his other brothers. And they were coming and bowing down before him. And his father knew this, and he's like, yo, are you saying that me, your father, is going to bow down before you? What's up with that? All right. And he said, but while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Pause. All right, that's where we're stopping for today. Is that cool? Is that a cool story? If y'all want to read on, guess what? You have a Bible, you can continue reading on, all right? Or you can use your phone to pull up the scripture. There's actually a movie called, what was the movie called? Coat of Many Colors or something? And it was, or King of Dreams, yeah. How many of y'all seen that movie before? I love that song that he's singing like to that little plant, you know. They played it at VBS. It makes me cry every time. All right, so look up the rest of the story if you don't want to be kept on a cliffhanger. But there's 3 things. Y'all say 3. 3 things. You don't have to crack your voice if you want to, but there's 3 things I want to glean from this text that's going to be really crucial for us as a youth group. Because like I said before, Joseph is a model for us as a youth group. There's these things that were prophesied over his life, and that's actually the first thing I want to bring up. All right, the first thing, the first point that I want to bring up to y'all is that Joseph had a promise over his life. All right, y'all say with me, promise. How many of y'all like the emoji up there? You got the promise. Doodle that on your notes. And so promise. What this is meaning is this, is that the dream that Joseph had over his life, or the dreams that he had, those 2 dreams, they were more than just a random dream, right? I have a whole bunch of dreams a lot. I actually dream in full color. I remember them. I was actually telling Thomas, our camera guy, about a dream that I had, and it was really funny. It was about Wheel of Fortune, and it was really, really awesome, weird, because every time it went to one girl, she kept cussing at me, and I was like, what is going on here? And she wouldn't stop it on live television, and so that's probably something I shouldn't say over during youth group, but it was just really funny. All right, so many of us have random dreams, right, or just weird stuff happens. How many of y'all dream, by the way? I want to know. I want to have a raise of hands. How many of y'all have dreams? Okay, cool. What about dreams almost every other night? Or you dream in full color, maybe? Is that okay? Cool. All right. Sometimes God can speak through our dreams, just like He did through Joseph. Now, not every dream is a dream from God. All right. I just want to put that out. But let me put it this way: you'll know it's from God when He gives you one. All right. That's the best way I can put it, because there's a peace about it. So, but there's 2 ways that God speaks over your life, because God gave Joseph a promise. He said, one day you're going to actually lead your brothers and your family, and they're going to bow down before you. Now, what's crazy is that Joseph may or may not have had a more of a prideful attitude about this. You know, if you had a dream that you're the youngest brother and everyone in your family is bound down before you, you'd probably be like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm what's up? I'm the boss. Yeah, get down to the ground, son. You know, like, and so I don't know if Joseph had that attitude or not, but what is a crucial point is that when we become leaders, it's very, very important for us to know that we're not in there to lord it over people. We're actually there to serve. We're going to see that in the life of Joseph, actually. He wasn't just some crazy leader who was in second command of all the world. He was literally a servant leader. He served people, all right? Is that cool or what? And so that's a little nugget, a free nugget for you. But here's the promise. God has a promise or a destiny for every one of us, and He hasn't called us to live boring lives, y'all. He hasn't called us to live boring lives. He's called us to live a life of adventure and a life that's filled with a lifestyle of heaven, where we're excited all the time. We're encountering cool, crazy miracles, or we're doing awesome stuff because we're living in the will of God. Y'all, guess what? When I was in high school, there was a time period in my life where I literally thought it would have been the best thing in the world, no lie, the best thing in the world to work at Walmart and to play video games all of my life. What? I was like, man, like I'm not playing. I was 16 or 17, and all my money would go to video games, and I would buy that. And I'm not dissing video games. I'm just saying this is what happened to me, all right? And I would play them all the time, and I couldn't even fathom my lifestyle without my video games because it was so awesome, you know. And that was back when we had the 360 and the Xbox, before Xbox One, all that, you know. And which really wasn't that long ago, but it sounds like it is. And so there's literally a time where I thought I was content with getting a job at Walmart and working my whole life, just some mediocre job, and just as long as I could play my video games, all right? How many of y'all know that that would kind of be a boring life if that's all I did? God called me out of that, and He's like, yo, Nick, I had something more important for you. And He actually called my family up here to Alaska. It's a huge, long story. But God rattled me, and we're not meant to have boring lives, okay? You guys, you're meant to have something that's exciting, adventurous. Is that cool? Are y'all with me or what? All right, He has a destiny over you. And there's two main categories which He speaks over our lives, okay? So what I'm saying here is that there's two ways that He tells you His promise for you. How many of y'all know that you have a promise for God? Raise your hand if you know that. God has a promise for you, or AKA His Word, AKA a destiny over your life. And there's two ways that He does that. Because God's Word, before I get into those two things, I want to say this, is that God's Word is His promise for you. I want y'all to repeat that for me. God's Word is His promise. So what that means is that, like whenever you read it, and I don't have my Bible up here. What the heck? I'm a heretic. No, I'm just kidding. There it is, right there. My Bible, my Bibli. All right. What this Bible means, all the promises in here can be applied to my life, all right? What I mean by that is that when you're reading up in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11 or whatever it is, and He says, and God's like, I have plans to prosper you, that I wouldn't forsake you. He was actually talking to the nation of Israel 2,020 or more like 2,500 years ago when they're exiled to Babylon. But that principle can be applied to my life, because just like God had a principle or had a promise for Israel's life, He has a promise for my life. Did I lose y'all there? That makes sense? Basically, what I'm saying is that if God speaks something in here, it can be applied to your life, okay? That's basically what I'm saying. So there's two ways that God will speak to you. Y'all want to know what the two ways are? First is His Word. Y'all lift up your Bibles if you have them with me and shake them up here. This is the Word of God. He speaks to you through this. This is proven to be true. Like there's over, I believe there's around 24,000 manuscripts of the Greek New Testament that's been found. They're not actual copies, but verbatim copies of almost 2,000 years ago. And that's more than any other Greek piece of artifact or literature that there's in existence. And in fact, that the Dead Sea Scroll that they found, there's this jar. I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, that's a rabbit trail. I'm killing it right there. Anyway, y'all can trust. If y'all want to know more about if you can trust God's Word or not, come up to me afterward and I'll let you know. I'll give you some hardcore facts, okay? Is that cool? So, you can trust this. This is God's purpose for you. It's His promise. The next way that He can speak to you is that was His written word. The next is called His spoken word, or I believe it's the Rhema word of God, His spoken word of God, right? Y'all say spoken. Now, this can look like multiple different ways. We're not going to get into it as much, but what Joseph experienced was the spoken word of God over his life. He experienced, because God can speak to us outside of His written word in ways such as dreams, in ways such as visions. Is that cool? Y'all can actually have visions. He can speak to your imagination. Sometimes you can see pictures in your mind, and that's God speaking to you about something. In fact, one time I had a vision, or they call it a word of knowledge, and I went to pray to somebody, and as soon as I grasped his hand, this picture of a rock that was covered with dust, and the letter M was on it. And I saw this hand come out and brush this rock away, or brush the dust off of it, and the M was erased. Relaced, what the heck? Erased. And then, and so after, I was like, hey, this may sound weird, but do you have, and I felt God tell me that He was in a relationship with someone. And I was like, does your wife, are you in a relationship with someone with the name M? And I stepped out there and said it. I know that's really weird. God didn't give me the full name, but He said that. And I was like, and he's like, yeah, dude, that's weird because I have 2 kids with this girl, and her name, or is something Margaret or whatever, is Megan. No, I'm just kidding. but with M. And so I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And I was like, yo, I saw this picture and God was speaking to me that you were in a relationship with this girl and he's actually going to begin to dust it off and dust that stuff off because there's some junk in it that he wants to push off and whatever. And at that time, I felt like God was gonna separate them, but I didn't think he was ready for all that. But what happened is that a couple months later, him and his girl broke up or whatever. It was this crazy thing, and God gave that to me in a word of knowledge through my imagination. And if I wasn't sensitive to it, I wouldn't have been able to speak into his life. And he was crying and all this cool stuff, and I ministered to him. Is that cool? So that's the spoken word of God. He can speak to you like that. How many of you have ever experienced that before or had something like that happen to you or you had it to someone else? Yeah? Anybody here? Okay, cool. The other way he can do that is through images, and most oftentimes it's that still small voice. And if you don't catch it, then you're going to miss it. All right. And a lot of the times we mistake his voice for our own thoughts because many times when we try to hear the voice of God, we're looking for a specific thought. Wow, that time flew by really fast. All right, sorry, rabbit trail. So many times we're looking. Someone needs to hear this tonight. Look. Many times we're looking for the voice of God, and guess what? We're saying, God, what do you sound like? God, what do you sound like? The thing is that our thoughts don't have sounds, right? Think right now, right? What are you hearing? And even scientists can't explain what a thought is necessarily. Where does it come from? How does it exist? That's actually what distinguishes us from the rest of the animal race, in a sense, is our thoughts, is our consciousness. And so what does that sound like? Yo, our thoughts don't have sound. So when we're hearing the voice of God, it's not as much what does it sound like, as much as what is it saying. Okay? So, makes sense? Those are the ways that God can speak to you. So saying all that, yo, there's a promise over your life, and He can speak that to you. First of all, through His written word, and after that, He can begin to stir things in your heart through dreams, through visions, through prophecy, through that still small voice. A lot of the stuff that I have a passion for, it was birthed out of a place of intimacy with God and one-on-one communion with Him. All right? That's how that's birthed. So if you want to know what your will is, what the promise of God is for your life, first, do what the written word says, which is love God and love people, right? Pretty simple. If you're not loving God and loving people, guess what? You're not going to come into the destiny of God. And the next thing is this. Listen to Him and ask Him to speak to you. All right, cool. Is that good? I know that was a really long point. All right. Here we go. Next thing, wisdom. Y'all say wisdom. I love the emojis up there. Okay. Wisdom. And I'm going to blow by this really fast. If you want my notes, hit me up afterwards. I'll be more than happy to give them to you so you can study them on yourself. But we're running short on time. Wisdom is this. Look, we need to handle God's word correctly. So when God gives us a promise, y'all say promise. When He speaks to us, when He tells us something, I believe that God has a promise for our youth group and that we're going to see many people get discipled, and He's going to use every one of you guys to do that. But look, that promise is only going to come into fruition if we know how to be wise with that. All right? Joseph probably was not the wisest in telling everybody about the dream that he had. Sometimes God speaks something to your heart and you aren't supposed to tell any about that until the season is right. What I told you about the 100,000, I waited a year until I told you guys that, until God told me to speak it, because I wasn't going to say anything outside of God's timing. Same with your life. When God speaks something to you, it doesn't always have to be blasted out on the speakers for everyone. You have to be wise about it. You can't cast your pearls before pigs, is what they call it, before swine, all right? Would you give a pig something that's expensive? Then why would you throw out something that's valuable to other people that aren't going to value it? All right? Wisdom. Are we using the Word of God? Listen, are we using the Word of God to manipulate people or to make ourselves look better than others? Sometimes, like Joseph, we can make that prophecy or that dream make us look better than other people. And guess what? That's not going to end good. And I believe that's something that the church has failed in for like a really long time, is that they use the Word of God to manipulate people and to trap them into a box called legalism or religion. And before they know it, the people are hurting, they're suffering, and they're not even living in the life that God has called them to live because we've manipulated the Word of God. All right? So y'all say, don't manipulate. Is that good? Is this making sense? Can I get some feedback? Yeah? Yes? Yes? Okay, good. Remember, if you don't say anything, I'm just going to keep rambling. It's going to be really weird. And I'll talk even more faster and faster and faster and faster before you cannot even understand the single word that I'm saying. Okay. All right, here we go. Joseph needed wisdom to handle God's promise for his life, just like we need wisdom to handle the promises of God for your life. All right? There's one thing that you can pray for. Look, hold up your Bible. Read this thing. Most importantly, read Proverbs 1. Proverbs chapter 1 talks about how there's this thing called wisdom. And wisdom is crying out in the streets. Who's going to listen to me? You know, who's gonna call on my name because I want to come? And wisdom, look, wisdom is the best thing that you could have as a young person. If you don't know what to pray, begin to pray for wisdom and pray for wisdom even more and more and more and more. All right? Is that cool? Practical tip, pray for wisdom. Get wisdom. You'll live an awesome life. All right. Number 3 is this. Don't be jelly. All right?
I love jelly though.
PB and J, I'm talking about jealousy here. Talking about jealousy. Don't be jealous. Maybe Joseph spoke too soon about his dream or mishandled it by being prideful, but we do know this for sure, that the promise over his life caused anger inside of his brothers. And when we begin to live in our calling, it can sometimes rub people the wrong way. How many of y'all have experienced that before? That when you begin to live in the promises of God, maybe some people don't like that as much that you used to be friends with or whatever. And they're like, bro, like, what's up with you, you religious freak? You know, like, what's happening? You know, like, you think you're better than me? And that's what Joseph's brothers were doing. You think you're better than me? It's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I found a better way to live than you. But saying that, there's sometimes that can create a jealousy or conflict, and if we're not careful, we can begin to blame God for that conflict, and it's not even God, it's the people around us, because we are responsible for our own actions. We live in a world that has a cause and a reaction. If I do something, it's going to create a butterfly effect or a chain effect that's going to affect other people, right? So, when we begin to live in our calling, it can rub people the wrong way. Or, look at this, it's the flip side. Put yourself in the shoes of Joseph's brothers. Or maybe we can be jealous of other people's callings, and it stirs up hatred or envy inside of our lives. Especially in this day and age of comparison. Yo, I want y'all to hold up your phones real fast. Hold up your phones. Hey, Nick, I won't be to youth group till like 6:10 or 6:15. No, I'm just kidding. All right, hold them up. Look, this can be one of the greatest tools that you can have in your world right here. Like, for real. Like, I didn't grow up with one of these. I'm not old, I know. And I love my phone. Like, I use it for so much stuff. It's amazing. You can play Minecraft Pocket Edition on it and just have fun with other people. You know what I'm saying? And so I remember when Angry Birds came out.
Oh, yeah.
The original, the OG, before they had like 100 million ones of them. But this thing can be one of the greatest tools in your life to help you out, or it can literally destroy your life. One of the reasons is because social media. Look, I found myself doing this too. I open up Instagram and I'm looking through my stuff and I'm like, whoa, man, that youth ministry is doing some cool stuff. Like, I wish our graphic design was that legit. I wish we had this. I wish I had. And before I knew it, I'm actually envying and comparing myself to the destiny and the calling of another individual, and it's actually influencing me in a negative way and is hindering me from stepping into my calling. How many of y'all ever found yourself doing that maybe? You're looking at your friend that or whatever that posted something. I know many of us don't have social media here, but for those of us who have, right, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever it is, like we're comparing ourselves constantly, and there's this thing called envy. And what's crazy is that do not envy is like one of the only 10 commandments no one ever talks about. That's one of the 10 commandments. I believe it's the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Do not envy your neighbor. Don't be jealous of your neighbor. And so look, Joseph's brothers were super jealous of him. They were jelly of Joseph's calling, and it actually caused friction amongst their relationship. And so we need to focus on our calling and not the attitudes of others, and we need to actually be aware of that. All right, we're about to land this thing. This is the conclusion right here, if you can pull that up. Look, this is the conclusion of tonight. If y'all can get just a couple things, maybe even one thing out of tonight, y'all say one thing. I don't want y'all to leave this place and not get anything. I want y'all to have something. This is the one thing. We need to be consistent in our obedience to God. I want y'all to read that to me. I think it's right there. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. We need to be consistent in our obedience to God. What this means, y'all, Joseph was a man who was consistent in doing the right thing over and over again. He was 17 years old, and it said, and I believe in verse 3 or verse 4, that he tended the flocks of his father and he served his half-brothers. Look, he was consistent. If Joseph was prideful and was all about me, he wouldn't have been doing that. He would have been up there and be like, yeah, look at me flaunting his red robe, or his colored robe or whatever. Like, no, Joseph was out there getting dirty. He tended his father's flocks, and he was consistent in being obedient and doing the things of what he needed to do. And look, as young people, we don't value doing the dishes as much as worship or listening to a worship song. We don't value honoring our parents as much as healing the sick, right? We don't value cleaning up our room as much as getting a word of knowledge or prophesying over somebody. Y'all see what I'm saying? We need to begin to value obedience just as much as operating in the gifts of the Spirit and seeing the crazy things of God come to place. Y'all see what I'm saying here? We need to be consistent in our obedience. Maybe we aren't seeing the fruit of what needs to happen because we're not being obedient to our parents. It's that easy. Joseph was a man who was obedient to his parents, and he was obedient in his calling to God. Every action we make affects us in our calling. Our destiny doesn't start. The promise God has for your life doesn't start by some crazy divine angel coming down to you and saying, Nick, Nick, I have chosen you to go to Africa. Like, yo, that's not what happens. Maybe it does. It happens for some people. It happened to Paul the Apostle. But most oftentimes than not, our destiny starts by being obedient in the small things. Joseph was obedient in the small things. Are you picking up the trash? Are you obeying your teachers at school? Are you obeying your teacher who may be your mom? Because you're homeschooled, Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing to be obedient to God? And look, it's not about beating yourself up if you fail, y'all. I fail all the time. You can ask Jessica and my brother, y'all, like sometimes I get an attitude. I'm like, You know what I'm saying? And so, look, we fall short, but it doesn't mean that we can't stay consistent in our obedience, all right? Sometimes our generation, look, this is the conclusion, so just bear with me. Sometimes our generation lacks the ability to be consistent because we're always swiping through 7-second clips of things, and it trains us to be uncommitted. Sometimes the stuff we look at trains us to be uncommitted because we're not, we're just always swiping, always flipping through stuff. You know what I'm saying? Y'all with me or what? Okay. Joseph was a young person who didn't give up on his calling because he was consistent in the things that matter. And look, this is the last point. The enemy will rob you of your destiny through the trap of comparison and inconsistency. If we begin to compare ourselves to the lives of others and envy other people, it's going to destroy us just like it destroyed Joseph's brothers. Or the enemy can rob us of our destiny by not being consistent and being obedient. All right? And so is that cool? That's really all I have for you tonight. I know this was a little bit of a longer message than what we usually do, but why don't y'all stand up with me, and we're going to close this thing out. All right, cool. What I'm going to do tonight for our response time, I want us to find a spot in the room. Don't go past the cameras. The reason being is because we get too spread out, it gets really awkward, and people start zoning out and doing their own stuff, all right? We're going to take about 5 minutes to respond to this word, okay? Can y'all do that with me? So right now, find a place around the room. Maybe it's where you're sitting. What it is, this is not a time to goof off or to mess with your friend or to get nachos, all right? All right, what we're going to do tonight, I want you to position your heart to receive from God, and I want you to be like, yo, God, I'm determined right now to be consistent. That's that easy. Can y'all do that with me? Maybe some of y'all need some wisdom and y'all can't focus on God. Look, ask God for wisdom, and I believe that too. There's a couple people here that there's some sort of brokenness in your life, that may be dependent upon another person or whatever that has happened. And look, God is willing to heal that in this little time frame that we have. I would ask you, if you have to leave, please respond at home, okay? Your response time in your bedroom or in the bathroom while you're taking a shower can be just as powerful as encountering God right here. Because now we don't always have enough time to spend 2 hours in worship, okay? Can y'all do that with me? Can y'all make that commitment to me? That for these next 5 minutes, we're going to ask God to pour out His wisdom and that we would be consistent to Him, and also that He would maybe heal brokenness in our lives or whatever it is. Is that cool? Can y'all do that? All right. I'm going to play this song. Just worship Him a little bit. If you got to get going, that's fine. But let's go for it.